Now, this text includes the three parts, which is the preliminary, the actual content, and then the dedication of merit. Within the actual content, there are the teachings given to the practitioners of the three capacities. Currently, we're studying the preliminaries, and the preliminaries including the 7 types of teachings, and right now we're talking about the 6th. Relying on the favorable circumstance of a spiritual friend. When relying on the sacred spiritual friend, our faults become exhausted, and our good qualities increase like the waxing moon. It is the practice of a Bodhisattva to value such a sacred spiritual friend as more precious than their own body. When we follow or attend certain friends or certain spiritual teachers, our faults, such as attachments and aversion, become exhausted. And all the good qualities, such as listening, reflecting, and meditating, love, compassion, and bodhicitta, increase further and further like the waxing moon. This is quite true. If you were to rely on a qualified spiritual teacher, then slowly and slowly your virtue would increase, and your faults would be distinguished, and it can be very noticeable. To regard such a sacred spiritual friends and excellent companions as even more precious than one's own life and body, and to correctly follow them in one's thoughts and actions is the practice of bodhisattvas, their manner of following a spiritual friend, that is. Concerning that, from the Sutra of Ornamental Array, never tire the sight of your spiritual friend. If one wonders why, the answer is that regarding spiritual friends, it is difficult to behold them, and it is rare that they appear. Now, we should not get tired of our spiritual friend, our spiritual teacher, because it's very difficult to encounter them in lifetimes. I believe I mentioned this previously in our previous class. In the last century, there are such great numbers of wonderful masters from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Lots of those masters either reside domestically or abroad, but nowadays, majority of them had already passed away. The younger ones, or the ones that's in their middle age, nowadays, the ones that's younger and in their middle age, but also qualified with the power to benefit others and truly embody compassion and bodhicitta, these kinds of spiritual friends are indeed much less than last century. In our world, in our time, it is difficult to encounter such wonderful friends, wonderful spiritual teachers. Moreover, the sutra teaches that there are more benefits to having accepted by a spiritual friend, such as not falling into the lower realms, not falling into the hands of evil friends, and not easily becoming overpowered by karma and negative emotions. When you have encountered a spiritual friend, then it is important for this spiritual friend to accept you. But accepting you doesn't mean to say that, well, when you go abroad, could you take me with you? When you are going somewhere, could you take me with you? If you don't take me, then it means that you don't accept me, then I better not to affiliate myself with you. I think the way that people interpret the accepting aspect from the teacher is quite sidetracked in some ways, because the true way of accepting you from a spiritual friend is that giving empowerments or giving the teachings that could lead you to liberation. Those are the ways of the spiritual friend accepting you. It is not to take you on a trip, on a tour, on a pilgrimage, or to have dinner together. It is not like that at all. If you were to think that by doing all of those leisure things is accepting you and thinking that, oh, this teacher is so compassionate to me, this is a wrong and a misunderstanding of accepting. Rather, if the teacher were to give you the most profound teachings, but don't really take you anywhere or talk to you on a daily basis, and you were to think that this teacher is really terrible to me, that is definitely a wrong view. In the Jakarta stories, it says that no one should be far from the sacred one. With a gentle demeanor, one should attend to virtue. When we remain near them, their qualities will rub off on us without being deliberately rubbing in. We will be influenced by the virtuous qualities of our teachers. And over here it says that furthermore, as for the need to depend on someone superior to oneself, purposeful expressions states, since sacredness is obtained by relying on a master, one should rely on one who is superior to oneself. It means that if we were to rely on a superior spiritual friend, we will eventually also obtain such kinds of fruition. For that reason, we should rely on a superior spiritual teacher. According to Vinaya, it is said that the entirety of one's pure conduct depends on a spiritual friend. It is said that you should at least rely on a spiritual teacher for 10 years, for over 10 years. According to the letter to a friend, through relying on a spiritual friend, pure conduct will become completely perfected. How to rely on a spiritual friend then? There are two ways to rely on a spiritual friend. The first one is by means of thought and by means of deeds. Concerning the first way, which is by means of thought, it is divided in two: training in the basic faith, that is devotion, and remembering the spiritual friend's kindness. It is taught that faith is the root and the preliminary for all the pure dharma. From a sutra, it says, as a preliminary engender the mother-like faith. There are many other such statements. As for the way of remembering the kindness, one should recall that, for instance, the Sutra of Ornamental Array teaches, which is the spiritual teacher, that is one who protects one from the lower realms. The second way of relying on a spiritual teacher is through deeds. It is taught in the ornament of sutras in the following manner: one should attend to a spiritual teacher by means of rendering service and possessions, paying homage, and engaging in practice. One should make offering by making offering of one's service and possessions, paying homage, that is the so the ones with the lower capacity is to provide possession, to make offerings of possessions to the spiritual teacher, and then the middling capacity is service. Nowadays, however, I think it is a bit perverted. People tend to think that the disciples that offers the possessions and money would be the best kinds of disciples. People would feel that the kinds of disciples that engages in practice quite diligently is not the best kind of disciple. Rather, would think that the qualified disciple is the one that is willing to make offering of wealth. According to the way of the Bodhisattva, it says that one should never forsake a spiritual friend who is learned in the meaning of the great vehicle and is supreme in the practice of the Bodhisattva's path, even at the cost of one's life. We need to rely on this kind of spiritual teacher, the one that is learned in the meaning of a great vehicle, and once one is relied on such kind of a spiritual teacher who is supreme in the practice of a bodhisattva's path, who has a great bodhicitta and a great aspiration, then one should not forsake this kind of spiritual teacher even at the cost of one's life. also stated in the way of the Bodhisattva, just as is described in the life story of Sri Sambhava. Study the way of knowing how to rely on a master. If one follows the spiritual teacher in a correct manner such as this, all faults in one's being will become exhausted, and all good qualities will increase. That brings about many benefits. The opposite of all these good qualities is the fault of not following the spiritual friend correctly. If we do not follow the spiritual teacher correctly, there are lots of faults that could be associated to it. Furthermore, Lord Atisha explained, dear friends, because you need a master until you reach enlightenment. Before you reach enlightenment, you should follow a master. Lots of disciples nowadays would say that, I've been practicing for many, many years, so I don't need a teacher. But that is really not true. Before you reach enlightenment, you still need to follow a sacred spiritual teacher. Maybe you have attained enlightenment, I don't know. And all the qualities of the great vehicle, be they great or small, are taught to arise in dependence upon a master. When besieged by a loud voice, Atisha, well, this person must be very rude. He said, Atisha, with a loud voice, please give us our instructions. He replied, hey, I have good ears. In order to, Atisha then here replied saying, hey, I have good ears. You don't have to shout out loud. In order to get our instructions, you need faith. There are lots of people during the time of Atisha, they do not have the proper veneration to Lord Atisha and would directly speak up the name of the noble Atisha and would say, Atisha, please give me instructions. Without respect and without veneration, is a sign of not having faith. If you do not have faith, even if it's the teaching of Mahāti or the great Madhyamika or any of those high teachings, you would not be able to receive it. You would not be able to uphold it. Some people would see the teacher as their relative, their friends. That is not appropriate. In Tibet, we say that if one were to see the teacher as an ordinary being, then it is just like giving the city to a dog or presenting city to a dog, then the dog would not be able to take the city. Even if the teacher do not have the full qualification, but if you were to venerate the teacher, you would still be able to receive the blessings, just as the story told about a woman venerating dog's tooth and taking that as venerating the Buddha's tooth, and she still received great blessings from it. So normally speaking, the veneration is really important. Without respect to the teacher, the behavior, one's behavior would become quite rigid, not tamed at all. You would be able to see that their mind is not tamed. If one is tamed, if one's mind is really gentle and tamed, then even that person walks and how he talks and how he carries out his actions are completely different than the others. So from speech, we can definitely tell the faith of one's mind or the respect from one's mind through their actions such as speech. Phuntsok Rinpoche once said that in Sutta there are three types of names that people would usually address him. One is Jigpen, that is the short form of Jigme Phuntsok, and a group of people would call him Jigme Phuntsok, and another group would call him the wish-fulfilling jewel. And Phuntsok Rinpoche said that, of course, whatever you call me doesn't really matter to me much, but if you were to call me Jigpen, that kind of name reflects on how little of faith people have of him. So the blessings that they would receive would be of inferior. And the middling ones would call him Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok. Usually the scholars would call him in such a way. The disciples of Phuntsok Rinpoche, since they have great faith, they would call Phuntsok Rinpoche as the wish-fulfilling jewel, Jigme Phuntsok, the auspicious one, and so on and so forth. And in such a way, they would receive great blessings and merits, just as supplicated to a wish-fulfilling jewel. When we make the observation, we can see that people who venerate teachers, though some of them may not have great wisdom nor lots of insights, but their beneficial activities can be quite vast, and their time of abiding in this world would be very long too. Because Phuntsok Rinpoche indeed is a wonderful master in this world, a great man in this that appeared in this world. From my observation, I noticed that people who respected Phuntsok Rinpoche, in fact, encountered obstacles, and people who revered him and supplicated to him, they had great activities of benefiting sentient beings in the later time. I do notice such situations. When we do rely on spiritual teachers, I think it's essential for us to respect the teachers, to the Khenpos and Khenmos. There are some female disciples whom would corner the Khenmos, and the Khenmos would have to deal with all kinds of obstacles that disciples would create. And people don't want to affiliate themselves with such kind of disciples. And of course, I understand it is the manifestation of a karma. At that time, it would be the best for those people to make confession, but also for the disciples, it is essential for you to understand, even if you received the Dharma teachings as short as one shloka, you should still revere and rely on such a teacher who had bestowed you such kindness of giving you Dharma teachings. When I first came here back in 1985, Phuntsok Rinpoche was giving empowerments. And during that time, the Sangha member from Doma Monastery were living in the area, it's called the Muni continent, which is the area I am currently living in. And we were living in large tents at that time. Lama Lashe, as well as another Lama from Drago, give us the teachings of 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. And at that time, after finding this commentary of the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva, I felt it is such a precious teaching. And ever since, whomsoever had shown me the kindness by giving me Dharma teachings, I would definitely try my very best to respect them. I wrote lots of the stories of my interactions with Phuntsok Rinpoche in my first memoir, and lots of the stories were included and lots were not. But I really want to tell you is that let it be Master Yingguang, let it be Venerable Atisha or the great masters, if we were to respect the great masters like such with great veneration, then we would be able to receive the siddhis of the superior capacity. If we were to have the middling respect, then the middling siddhi, and very little respect, then very little siddhi. On the other hand, you don't have to go to the other extreme where you would bow down all the way to the ground, almost like stretching your body like practicing yoga. that is not necessary. Sometimes those kinds of veneration is a bit too pretentious. That is not necessary. If you were to have faith inside, then that kind of veneration from your heart can be carried out into your action very naturally. And that kind of natural veneration is essential. Atisha over here says that while you need to have faith, because my ears work really well, you don't have to shout at me. If you have faith, then you would be able to receive the basic instructions. I myself, when I read this part, I really felt that I know this kind of person who used loud voice to shout, saying that, Atisha, give me instructions. It is indeed not so respectful. And then Zhongtunpa asked Atisha, you who are of pure conduct, does your pure conduct depend upon companions? And then Atisha answered, pure conduct certainly depends on virtuous companions. Lochen Rinzin, in front of Lochen Rinzin, I'm not sure if Atisha relied on him or received teachings from him. And then Zhongtunpa also said, rely on the circumstance of a teacher day and night. Take the sacred friend, a walking staff of virtue as support. According to clear realization, it says that there are the two types of acceptance, that is the outer and the inner. The outer refers to the common spiritual teacher that would accept the students, and then the inner acceptance means it is the compassion. Lots of people throughout our life had not relied on spiritual teachers before. I would like to point out that it would be the best for you to rely on a spiritual teacher for a long period of time. Those of you who stayed over here to participate in the after-class presentation groups, some of you had been participating for over 10 years. I think it is just like growing a tree. If the tree has not grown to a certain mature state, and if you were to take it out, or if you were to do anything to it, then it may die. It is the same for the beginners who tread on the path of study, contemplation, and practice. You definitely need the help from a companion who can help you to to make sure that your view is correct. That is why you need to rely on a spiritual teacher like a walking staff, like a walking cane. A spiritual friend is the best place to rely on.
Zhubun Zulin Zhuba Zhula